Hello, hello, hello. We said we'd be back, and we are, and we even fulfilled a promise. Video, 2 years after we mentioned bringing it to you. Here it is, Season 5 of the Ball Card Show, the sports podcast.
For the Sports Collector.
I'm Jason Otero.
And I'm Gary LeMaster.
We're glad to have you with us. This is what we look like.
It terrifying as it is, and we even have lighting, which I don't know that helps. It really accentuates the ugly.
Yeah, I think also this is us down a combined 50 pounds from where we were last season.
We're so fat.
We got that going for us. It has been a longer delay. Gary does have an update for you why we didn't start about a month ago this season.
Yeah, so I almost died, and I was I was in the hospital for a week.
It's not that funny.
But yeah, long story short, a couple days before Christmas, I started not feeling very well, and my wife made me go to the hospital. And it's a good thing she did because doctors said I was probably 24 hours away at the most from having my intestines rupture. So they cut me open on Christmas morning. Proud owner of a new Build-A-Bear scar.
Yeah.
Just about 8 and 9 inches long, straight up the middle of my gut. And I was in the hospital for a week. They talked about having to maybe go back in because my intestinal tract wasn't waking back up like it should. Finally, it woke up. You were there for that. It was definitely an interesting experience for everybody.
You said it very nicely. When my guts started waking up.
Yeah.
But I was there for it.
You were there for it. You even told me to look you dead in the eye. It was real awkward.
Can I say what?
You sure can. It's fine.
You look me in the eye. You let that poopy out right now.
So, but
that was way too much information.
It was a lot.
Hey, now you can visualize, put a person to the story.
Yeah, and through all that, I was as high as a kite. Like, I'm on a Dilaudid drip 24 hours a day, so I'm just in and out. But, so I was in the hospital for a week, and then it's been a couple months of recovery time. Just went back to, like, the day job this week. And, so that's what the delay was. I really do appreciate, though, I want to say how many messages and texts that we have gotten from you guys asking not just how I'm doing, but where's the podcast. We heard you, and we apologize that it's been a minute, but we are back, and we are back doing what we said we were going to do. We took that action, and now you are forced to see our faces. Jason would say you get to see our faces. I don't like that.
If you don't want to see our faces, you can still listen on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. But we would really like it if you did this on YouTube. Follow us. There'll be a lot more video content. You know, Gary almost dying is a big deal.
Yeah.
But we have even bigger news towards the end of this podcast.
We do. And
since you did, like, if you had died, that would have been the biggest news.
Yeah.
But since you are still around,
we've got bigger
what
news.
we have is bigger news.
And if you are just going to listen and not watch on YouTube, totally fine with that. Before you leave this YouTube video, though, hit that subscribe and like button for us. It helps us out a ton. And you got to tell YouTube that you like us.
Yep. That helps a lot.
Even if you don't.
All right. You ready to jump into this?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's catch everybody up on what's been going on in the hobby, some big highlights, sports news, all that kind of stuff. So starting off, we'll start most recently and kind of work our way back. PSA kind of slid a subtle change in that's actually
just a
massive deal for the hobby.
Yes.
When did that drop? Middle of last week?
It's probably nobody really knows exactly when. Somebody noticed it
the last month.
Somebody noticed it a couple weeks ago. PSA didn't announce it. They didn't make a big deal about it, but it is a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
So if you weren't aware, there are 4 things that a grader looks at when they're grading your card. And if you don't know what grading is, look it up.
We're
not going to dive.
30 hours on it in the podcast.
They're looking at your corners, your edges, your surface, front and back, and the centering of the card. Now, the thing of those 4 that is the most apparent if it's off is centering. I guess if you have like a surface divot, that's going to be more apparent. But in general, centering is the biggest thing. PSA's allowance for centering for a PSA 10, which is their highest grade, has always been 60-40.
Right.
And you will see cards out there that are like 90-10 that are that way. I tell people all the time that if they're new to the hobby, you don't really understand this. But until about 5.5 years ago, PSA was where we sent all of our off-center cards to have a chance at getting a 10. If you had a really nice card, it went to BGS. Obviously, that isn't the case anymore. However, they've now changed the standards to 55-45, which is what SGC has always been. And now the standard for a PSA 9 is 60-40.
Yep.
If you're outside of 60-40, you're not even going to get a 9 on centering. You might get a 9 on the card if everything else is perfect, but those 70-30 cards aren't even going to get 9s anymore. So that leads to the question of, what does that mean for the market? Does the market adjust to that? Does older graded PSA 10s start to lose value compared to the newer stuff? Are they going to make a change to the label? It went from no lighthouse to the lighthouse label, and then they went from the lighthouse label to the lighthouse label with the QR code. Are they going to make a change to the label so that there is a transition that we know this is the day that this started?
Yeah, the implication for me that I think really needs to be considered, where this could affect the market, if there's not a clear way of being able to tell when this slab was created. Because, in my opinion, this is going to do a couple things. It's going to make the 10 more desirable, which, if they actually become more consistent, I'm fine with them being more strict on the grade. I think it's a good thing. But what I'm concerned with is the millions of COVID slabs in a PSA 9, all of a sudden people demanding a higher price when they shouldn't, because they're probably what PSA would grade a 7 or an 8 now.
Right. Well, the good news on that front is the stuff from that period of time that's a 9 sells for less than raw.
Well, that is the case, but 2 years from now, when a 9 means more, if there's not a way to tell on that case.
But that goes back to this, and it's something that if you've been around the hobby for a while, you've probably heard and you may not have understood, but it bears repeating. Buy the card, not the flip.
Yeah.
Right? So the flip is the little tag inside the holder that says what the card is and what the grade is. Buy the card, not the flip. It happens in vintage all the time. Not all PSA 3s are going to sell for the same in vintage. If you have a really well-centered PSA 3 that has bad corners, maybe a crease that's not very visible on the back, it's going to outsell an off-center 3 with crisp corners 100 out of 100 times.
Yeah.
Because guys who buy vintage look at the card. They don't look at just the grade. And I think that's going to start to happen more and more with the modern and ultra-modern stuff. If you're looking at a slab and you see a 10 on it or you see a 9 on it, look at the card. Don't just buy the flip.
Yeah.
That's the simple solution.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I think we're going to have these people that have been doing group subs. These card shops that have been sending off 1,000 a month because they're getting a couple bucks a pop. Nothing wrong with that. But it's going to be interesting to see how it affects the LCS when all of these collectors are all of a sudden getting 80% 9s when they were at a 40% gem rate. There's going to be now I think buyers are going to have a ton of leverage. This is a 10. Is it a new 10? Well, no, it's from a couple years ago, but it's a 10. Well, I think this is more in the 60-40 window. Well, no, it's not. It's in the, so it's going to create some interesting space, or people with new 9s, if the 9s do jump a little bit, which I do think will, part of what it's become 10 or nothing with a multiplier.
The ultra modern stuff.
I think that's wrong. I think a 9 should fetch a little bit more value.
Not on a base card. I don't think so on a base card.
We can have a difference of opinion.
Absolutely.
I think a 9 should fetch a little bit more than raw, but I don't think it should be a 3x multiplier.
No.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. Let's keep it moving. Paul Skeen's 1-of-1 MLB debut. I'm sure if you watch this today or you're listening to the pod, you already know this story. This has been fuel for the conspiracy theories. And there's a few missing pieces in this story, for sure.
Are the missing pieces that none of it makes an ounce of sense? You know how you meet somebody and you don't really know them. They seem like they're okay, and they tell you one thing, and you're like, okay, I can buy that. And they don't just take the win.
Mm-hmm.
They just keep going, and by the time they're 3-4 steps deep into it, you're like, they're full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's just like how that happens. And this is what Fanatics has done with this whole deal. So people were saying from the rip that this Skeens was not actually put into boxes, that Topps was going to hold it back. Fanatics was going to hold it back to drive sales of the product. And they drove sales of the product. Like, the minute that it was announced that this card was pulled, prices on the product dropped by 40%.
Yeah.
Like overnight. Went back to basically what it launched at on the website and maybe a little less. But here's where it gets weird. The kid who pulled it, evidently they said it's an 11-year-old kid. And they could have just left it at that. And nobody would have batted an eye. And then a week later, they're like, here's the handwritten journal entry from this kid about it. Okay. Like, I'm not saying no 11-year-old boys have a journal, but I don't know too many.
Yeah.
And then a week later, it was, oh, now it's going to be offered on the Fanatics Collect platform for auction. And then a few days after that, it was, oh, and the family has now decided that all of the proceeds from this card are going to go to benefit the wildfire victims in California. Are you kidding me? What?
Well, the PSA turnaround, this getting a 1010.
Oh, that can be done in one day.
Well,
walk through
a 10 auto where the signature is not where it should be.
Oh, well, yeah, no.
Like, there's a lot of things there's a lot of parts of the story. Do we know it? No. Is there an 11-year-old that wouldn't take a picture with that card? I'm not aware of one.
And does your common sense kick in at all? That's what it boils down to.
The only part of this that would give any kind of credibility at all. Okay? So let me run a scenario where this is possibly true.
Okay. I'm interested.
This is a family that has money and has had money before. Okay? Just run a hypothetical with me. They get this card and they have an idea that this is something that is huge. Okay?
Okay.
Massive deal. Now, we're told in the story that this was a Christmas present, blah, blah, blah.
Anyway, it was the one thing he asked for, which doesn't lend credence to the rest of the
You win the lottery tomorrow, a significant amount of money.
Yeah.
Okay? The first thing that I would do would be call an attorney.
Yeah.
To make sure that I have everything ironed out, and I don't want everyone to know that I just won all this. That's the only angle in this where this could make some sense. Somebody that wanted privacy, somebody that it really was just about collecting it, but I can't imagine somebody that would just say, you know what? I mean, kind of, from the mouth of babes, right? Maybe this child did want to, give a couple mil. I don't know. When did the
card hasn't sold yet, but it's going to go for $4 million.
$4 million.
That would be my guess.
And all of it donated.
That's the part where it's like a bridge too far, Fanatics. You just want a bridge too far with your story to be credible anymore, because it doesn't, unless it's a situation like you just said. And if it's that, then who cares if there's publicity, because you're not getting any money from it and you're already rich, and anybody who knows you already knows that you're rich. So,
or it's more about privacy, Either way,
bridge too far.
One of two. So here, I will give them this much. I expected it to be hit by a massive breaker late, like product held, and then later.
Well, if it was ever put into the product.
Well, yeah. You're not letting me finish my. You're spinning your theories, but you won't allow me to spin.
Finish your
This
theory.
is how I feel. This is what it's like to face it. But it was pulled. It was hit. Maybe $4 million is what this card's going to fetch. Unbelievable. And I hope it doesn't happen, but that guy's spin rate, like when you look at a pitcher, it's like a quarterback. You got a few years to find out. Now, is Skeen's special in a way we haven't seen in a very long time? Absolutely.
Yeah.
$4 million card, though.
Well, yeah, that's a card that there's certain cards that you're buying that a person is going to buy. They're not buying that card to try to make money on it later. They're buying that card so they can say, hey, I bought this card. Look at me. Mm-hmm. Same reason that why would you buy a PSA 10 Mickey Mantle rookie when you could buy a 7 that looks really good for, less than $30 million.
Right.
Yeah. Like somebody's buying that card as a flex. The money's not the point there. So.
Oh, and that's too much for the player to want to buy it.
Well, yeah, I mean, the package that the Pirates offered was the equivalent of about $2.5 million. Although, if I had hit that card, which obviously didn't happen, I would have taken the Pirates offer and turned it into tens of millions of dollars, because I would have immediately taken the Pirates offer. I'd have reached out to some type of an entertainment lawyer, an entertainment agent, and said, hey, here's my idea. Let's take these season tickets right behind home plate and let's turn this into an episodic thing where I take a different celebrity to every game, and I interview them throughout the game. And we get 30-minute episodes every week of people who know baseball, don't know baseball. They're just famous, and they're at this game with me, and we're eating hot dogs and drinking beer and talking ball.
Mm-hmm.
That would be huge.
Yeah, well, we'll never know.
No, we won't.
All right. Moving on. The NBA market. So the superstar market is stagnant.
Yeah, so
I mean,
the NBA market is really weird right now. And all of the dollars are going into what I call modern vintage. The ultra modern market, unless your name's LeBron and it's a gold, or Steph Curry and it's a gold, like the ultra modern market is just kind of not moving much. Giannis, he's hurt right now, but like before he got hurt, he was having another top 5 player in the league season. Jokic is maybe going to win his 4th MVP award. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is playing at a phenomenal pace, and their cards just aren't really moving much from where they were preseason. Now, the market is still liquid, but you're not seeing the gains that you would expect to normally see for this time of the season as guys are establishing themselves.
Well, let's just peel back the onion a little bit more. The league itself is struggling a little bit. The numbers are down in the stands. The people on the fringes that were like, yeah, I like to watch basketball, their viewing is down. Like, there's a lot happening. You have these blockbuster trades like
Luka getting traded.
That disaster, going on down there.
For a bag of peanuts.
I mean, Mark Cuban has to be...
Well, and then Anthony Davis getting hurt for multiple weeks. The day he starts playing for the Mavs, just like,
yeah. It's really interesting. Now, I do think that there's a little bit of market fatigue when you have a year like last year where there's this Wemby product overpriced, that Wemby product overpriced, this Wemby, and the big buyers are upside down a large percentage. Now, chronic gamblers are still going to open stuff to see if they hit something, but people are realizing that this value isn't quite where it was. It's like what happened with football after that 2020 class.
You
had a couple years of that where it was like they were responding in a way where it's like, it's not as hot.
Yeah.
Well,
we talked about that. What was the name of that terrible product? The high
the
end.
Wemby Mercury.
Mercury. I can't tell you over the last 2-3 months how many times people have come up to me at shows with Wemby stuff from that product, wanting to sell it, and the conversations with them are disheartening because they're like, man, nobody's offered me anything for this stuff. This was $10,000 for the box. I'm like, yeah, man. Yeah, unless it's the dual LeBron and Wemby stuff or super low numbered, like you're of 75 non-autos, a $50 card, man. I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's where it is.
Yeah. Just keep the card for a while and hope Wemby turns out to be really something, and then you'll get a portion of that back.
Figure out how to airbrush a Spurs logo onto it somewhere. That's the real issue.
Pay for an IP auto, maybe, something like that.
Yeah, like that's your... The IP auto market's dead too. So
no, vintage will still do it, but the new stuff,
yeah.
All right, let's keep it moving. Playoff, Super Bowl, like the football market. What are the biggest changes that you're seeing coming out of what was quite possibly one? That was a fun Super Bowl to watch.
It was the most satisfying Super Bowl I've watched in a decade.
2, you have like 2 of the most diehard fan bases, but the rest of the country really don't care for either of those fan bases.
Neither one of them are likable at all.
The funny thing was I told my wife, I said, this is hilarious because if Philly loses, they're going to burn this city down. And then if Philly wins,
they're going to burn the city down.
And the next day she's like, oh my gosh, you weren't kidding. The videos, I saw somebody stole a cop's horse.
Yeah.
I saw somebody was literally subway surfing on top of a
East
subway.
Coast rage is going to come out regardless of the outcome.
But it was satisfying to watch such a perfectly executed coaching scheme against Andy Reid.
I've never seen Andy Reid get that out coached, but here was the statistic that blew my mind, right? It blew my mind. Mahomes obviously played one of his worst games as a pro and definitely the worst game he's ever played in the playoffs. And the statistic, this isn't exact, but it's very close because I don't have it in front of me. He faced pressure on like 36% of his snaps during that game. And he threw 2 interceptions and only had stats worth of crap because he patted them in garbage time when the game was so far out of reach. They're just chucking and ducking. And the narrative is, Patrick Mahomes just had one bad game, and he's still, C.J. Stroud over the course of his second season in the NFL averaged 40% pressure rate every single game.
Yeah.
And in the playoffs against the Chiefs, in a game that they probably should have won, he had 53% pressure rate, and he had no turnovers, had 270-some yards, had a touchdown.
Yeah.
And the narrative is some sophomore slump, C.J. Stroud. Moral of that story is Stroud's not a bad buy.
Yeah.
Overall, the market, though, the playoff market was interesting. I went pretty heavy on Josh Allen because I thought the Bills were going to smoke the Chiefs. I really did. The good news is Allen won the MVP, but I bought some big Josh Allen stuff, like some true RPAs, National Treasure stuff, some big rookie stuff of his. And I was good. I was able to sell that stuff and come out ahead. And I've got one big one left, but he won the MVP, and I'm good. It'll be probably gone this weekend. His market did this. Lamar's market did this, and then immediately just did this. Like, it was like, blink. Because, again, Lamar, once again, playoff Lamar showed up. And people buying Justin Herbert going into the postseason, I didn't understand. And it was not good. But now after the Super Bowl, what's been really interesting to me is Mahomes loses a Super Bowl, which, he's been to 5. He's won 3. That's still all-time stuff. But he loses the Super Bowl, and his market doesn't dip very much at all. Like, at all. 10% maybe. Jalen Hurts wins the Super Bowl, wins an MVP, does it impressively. Now, should he have won the Super Bowl MVP? I think they should have given it to the Eagles D-line as a whole. Those 4 guys should have got the MVP. But he gets the Super Bowl MVP. The Eagles win. Saquon was not much of a factor in the game. I mean, he was a factor in that he opened everything up.
He was the only factor, it seemed like, that Chiefs defense. Like, they were hedging their bets to say,
beat us if you can.
If you have to pass.
Yeah,
and then they did.
Yeah.
I think this Jalen Hurts conversation is a good one.
His market hasn't really gone up
that's
since
exactly
he won.
what I was going to say.
Weird.
I probably have a couple hundred of his lower end rookies, which typically any kind of movement, if somebody can go back and buy a quarterback's rookie card from 3-5 years ago, and they are
for $4.
For $4, I was expecting to be. I sold one.
Yeah.
And then looking online, just seeing it hasn't done. He isn't. The people decide who they want the hero to be. It's kind of what's happening.
Yeah.
That was an unbelievable performance by him.
Yeah, it was. I mean, he led the team in rushing.
Yeah.
He had 350 total yards.
Making smart choices.
Yeah.
Some of the passes he was making were pretty tough.
He threw one bad pass the whole game.
Yeah, I was impressed with him as a thrower of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, he's always been a pretty good thrower of the ball. The question with him was always, is he going to be consistent enough with his decision making? And he's become very, very good at that.
Yeah.
So his market not moving much has been weird. Like, Josh Allen saw a 20 to 25% increase throughout the playoffs as they went through.
Why? Let's talk about that. People are pulling for him. They want to see him pull this off.
Yes.
Everyone people love the story of the Buffalo fans and how they deserve it.
Josh Allen's a super likable dude.
Yeah.
He really is. And I'm not saying Jalen Hurts isn't a likable dude.
That's fair.
But I will say that Jalen Hurts, the way he presents himself in the media, he presents himself as just a very aloof kind of guy. Not a mean guy, not a cold guy, but just kind of aloof.
And what I understand of him is he's actually a pretty humble guy.
Yeah, very much so.
A good dude. But it's interesting, and that's where it's just it is a hobby. It is not an equation. I think that's
correct.
Important.
That's a really good way of stating it.
Equation of, hey, they performed like this, so this should do that. This is not a stock. This is a hobby-focused business. So likability is a thing.
Yeah,
there's a reason that.
Why do
Dennis Rodman's stuff that should have little value? He's just special player, but some of his lower end stuff, I know in my store, as soon as it's in, it's out. He was just that relevant in culture.
Well, and it's like, if you're talking about what you said, it's a hobby, not an equation. That's such a good way to put it. Jalen Hurts just won a Super Bowl. He's been to 2 Super Bowls in 3 years. He has performed very well in the regular season. Justin Herbert still outsells Jalen Hurts almost 2-1
Yeah.
price wise.
Yeah.
It's insane to me.
Yeah. I think being on a team that is very disliked can affect it too sometimes.
I don't disagree, but it also, that fan base is very passionate too.
Yep.
And one would think that fan base would
Maybe they're
help
carrying the
drive
whole
that price
load.
up. I guess so.
Okay, let's talk a little bit. Let's take a shift. I think we're kind of caught up. Just trying to think if there were any other, there was some interesting back and forth. One thing we didn't write down, but Ken Golden's conversation where he was talking about
Fanatics trying to monopolize.
and the monopoly and their direct to auction offer. And usually, so the way he presents things, I'm not always crazy about. But in this situation, I don't think he's wrong. It's ironic because for a long time he was the high end auction monopoly. But I guess if it's not still that way, it must not have been that much of a monopoly, or he wasn't very good at it. Even so. He presents this idea saying this is a monopoly. It's not fair that they're offering this incentive where I don't even have an opportunity to be the one to auction the card. So what did you think about that?
I thought that it was a very soft-spoken declaration of war.
Oh.
And the problem that Ken Golden's going to run into, and it happens to delusional people. And
oh, boy.
Ken Golden is a delusional human.
Oh, boy.
It happens to delusional people. Ken Golden thinks that he can out-pocketbook Fanatics.
Mm-hmm.
Ken Golden cannot out-pocketbook Fanatics. Like his offer was, hey, we will outbuy Fanatics. We will pay you way more than they will. Call us first. Right. I'm not sure where he thinks he's going to out-pocketbook a publicly traded company worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
Right.
I don't know where he thinks that's going to happen. But it seems to be what he thinks he can do.
Well, I think he's banking on the fact that he has repeat buyers that are serious money internationally. And that's true. One thing that I was impressed with was some of the superstars and largest, most valuable collection owners in the world seem to have a pretty genuine relationship with him. Watching him and Barry Bonds sit down, I think that his relationships, or as we said it, as people that are older, his Rolodex is still pretty impressive. But there's a wave rolling in. You're absolutely right about that.
Well, if I'm Fanatics and I see that, all I do is I just call and say, hey, he just said he was going to do this publicly. Bump our offer 300%.
Yeah.
And let's bankrupt him.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I do if I'm Fanatics.
I don't think they even are going to worry about it. I don't think it affects them at all. Like, it's wasted energy and resources.
I mean, Fanatics platform is kind of not good, so...
Well, yes, but it's basically just a rollover from what was before.
PWCC,
yeah, it's just PW. I would guess that there'll be some reiterations of that and some revisions that... but this idea of a concierge service, I open the card, I send it direct, it's handled for me. Like, there are people that's going to be very appealing to.
Sure.
Also... the star power of Fanatics being able to pull any relevant athlete at any moment. They're on their socials. They're opening packs. For the younger collector, Golden is like, I don't want to, hear me out when I finish this. Let me finish the thought. But to the younger collector, I do think that over the next 10 years, Golden is spoken about in the way that you and I spoke about Beckett and how this was the gold standard for a market, for pricing. This was the gold standard for grading. Now, they're not the same business by any means, but I wonder if Fanatics' emphasis is so heavily on evangelizing the next generation of collectors that they're just going to target that and realize that, there's still going to be these auction houses that move really big cards, but we'll take the other 98% and be happy with that.
Yeah, that may be the case. And I don't disagree with your assessment there. I do think that behind the scenes, a guy like Michael Rubin might be a little more petty than we think.
Could be.
I think that there's scenarios where he looks at that and goes, okay, cool.
We'll find out pretty quick. I think it's going to be
Ken Gold starts having to pay $30,000 for $10,000 cards real quick.
Yeah. It's going to be a story worth watching.
Yeah, for sure.
And in the background, you'll just see Jeff Wilson going, yeah, that's what I always said.
Oh, gosh. Speaking of Jeff Wilson, one thing we do need to briefly discuss because it's so relevant and such a big deal in the hobby right now I don't want to get too far down a rabbit hole. I don't want to get too fired up about it. I'm just going to say this, and I say it as somebody who has a personal friend who works there. Boycott Backyard Breaks. Don't give them a dime of your money, ever. If you're not familiar with what happened, go look it up. Long story short, one of the owners of the company on stream said some PDF file stuff that was really gross.
Yeah.
The company still has not come out and condemned it.
They did put him in the corner for timeout.
Yes.
And he got no milk and cookies at snack time.
Yeah, and even worse, they just kept going without even acknowledging it. And the only way that there's going to be anything resembling the correct level of justice in that situation is if we as consumers say, okay, you've shown us who you are. We're not giving you any more of our money.
Yeah. There were opportunities for them to phase him out of the business. And listen, they could have done this in a way where he still was paid for whatever he had established value-wise. It's a direct violation of Whatnot standards in there. I mean, legally, there's a door that's open right now because they have terms of use for anyone streaming, and it spells out exactly what happened there as being a violation.
And what Whatnot will say is, well, we terminated his account.
Yeah, yeah.
But let's not pretend that Backyard Breaks isn't 15 to 20% of Whatnot's revenue.
Well, that's just what's
business,
happening
yeah.
with it. So yeah,
it was. I didn't think it would be. I think it would be disingenuous of us as people who have somewhat of a voice in the hobby to not at least address.
Yeah, there's no
that situation.
No place, no excuse.
No, there's no joke. That's not something you joke about. And I'm going to say this, and you guys that listen regularly know probably what I'm about to say. I have seen people defending this. I have seen people saying, oh, he was just joking. Listen to me very clearly. If you are listening or watching this podcast and you're one of those people, we don't want you here. Sorry. If you're going to defend that kind of stuff, you're not our crew. Period.
And I will be just a little bit more moderate than him on this. And I'll say, do I think he was joking? Yes. Is that joke ever allowed to come out of somebody's mouth? Is it funny? No.
Right.
Like, that's the issue. Like, you're allowed to say, this goes back, we've had this conversation with about Harrison Bucker. You can say whatever you want to say, but you also accept whatever consequences come with that.
Right.
Freedom of speech is not freedom from any consequence. So that's stupid and dumb. And I'll be honest, like, I do notice a theme with the people defending it. The people that are like, I'm still going to go there. Yeah, because you're a degenerate gambler.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Who's willing to overpay.
Yeah.
Because they're one of the more expensive breakers out there.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day.
And one thing that really drove me nuts is the way that, like, to be that size of a company and to have no clue how you should address this, how you should communicate with your consumers, when their live stream feeds were getting blown up with comments like, I can't believe you guys, you have to let him go.
Insta-blocking people.
Insta-blocking, banning customers rather than just saying, absolutely, it's a horrible thing. The channel's been taken down. Absolutely, you should read the statement. Absolutely, there was no ownership. It's defensiveness. It's just like, this is what happens when you have a bunch of 20-year-old kids just yelling into a camera and being handed tons of money.
Yeah.
I think it's just, now I sound like an old guy, but that streaming platform has created that. Most of these streamers were being hired in to create hype and energy, and your job is to speak in a way that drives revenue up and not down. So even from a pure business standpoint, saying anything stupid like that is a moronic decision for the business.
And it's
doubling
down.
Yes,
that was the part that got me.
Part.
He says something that's bad, right? And in that moment, and I think we've all been there, not with that subject, but we've all been in a situation where we say something, and the minute it leaves our mouth, we go, oh. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can take the mature path and go, hey, you know what, guys? I just said something that I should not have said.
Yeah.
I did not mean it to come out the way that it sounded. That sounded awful, and I'm sorry. That's not what happened here. He said it. The guy beside him went, oh, really? Like, here's your out. And he went, no, I'm going to keep going for about 5 minutes on this subject.
Yeah. No place for it.
Nope, not at all.
All right, let's talk about what we're seeing in the live market right now with shows online. I'll tell you, November and December, first half of January, were brutal online sales for me with eBay. Surprisingly. Typically, Christmas season, it's picked up a lot more. There could have been some eBay metric issues that I was dealing with. That's a whole nother conversation we can jump into next week. But in the last month or so, mid-January, it's been very active market. Even on Facebook, I've been seeing more activity within the groups where it kind of died down a little bit. What are you seeing?
So I don't obviously sell on eBay really. So that's a part that I didn't see. I know we talked about it a lot because I know you were really frustrated a few times. And it's weird in that market when it just like a faucet gets turned off and you're like, what is going on? You try to call the plumber and the plumber is eBay and they're like, yeah, sorry. We don't know. For me, the live show market has still been hopping. I mean, occasionally like right before Christmas, and right after, attendance was maybe not as great as normal, but dollars were still flowing. Now, here's what I have seen. The vast majority of deals being made at smaller shows. And when I say smaller shows, I mean 100 tables or less, like one-day local shows, are on cards in that $50 to $200 range. Anything below that $50 range is kind of and anything above that $200 range is very hit or miss, unless there's big buyers. But I went and did the big jumbo show up in Troy, and it's a 2-day show, and it's usually really a strong show. Now, it did happen the same weekend as Dallas, so a lot of big money was in Dallas. Same weekend as Eastgate and Cincinnati. So, but that 2-day show was kind of a disappointment for me. I did some good buying there, but sales-wise, it was about 50% of what I expected. But then a couple weeks later, I was in Pittsburgh for a 3-day show, and I did double what I expected to do. And that's a massive show. If you haven't had a chance and you're in the Midwest, whenever you see advertising for the Pittsburgh 600, it's actually in Washington, Pennsylvania, make time to go. This time it was almost 700 tables. It's 3 days, and it was awesome. So much really cool stuff there.
One of the other things that you've been doing a lot of is sourcing on Whatnot, targeting certain price points and realizing that...
Give away my secrets?
Oh, yeah. You and 500 streamers on there. It's become a pretty viable option. It sounds like you really need to pay attention.
Stuff.
Yeah, don't give away your secrets, but it's been a good spot for you. There's some rooms that you can get in. And then the other piece of this that's been interesting and intriguing to me to consider is these low-end rooms with 20 people in them selling $2 cards for $5 all day long.
Yeah. Whatnot enables impulse buying.
One thing that is happening in general, so despite the story that we just covered, Whatnot is getting a mass migration of sellers, not just in sports, but online reseller,
yard sales,
clothing. Hey, here's a storage locker. I don't even know what's in here, but for the next 3 hours, we're going to sell it.
Gary Vee was talking about this 6 months ago. I see a day very soon where people are just going to have their phone walking around their house on platforms like Whatnot or wherever and just say, here's this teapot.
That's what's happening.
Yeah.
It's already happening like that. But all that means is that this short live show
interactive shopping experience.
That's taking off. What does that mean for us? Well, I do think that means the comp market's going to be very interesting. As more people are buying in live auctions that aren't documented, you have an opportunity to buy well below comp without that being the new established comp. So good for you.
That's why I don't buy on eBay.
Yeah. The trade-off with that is if you're selling for speed and volume of sale. Until you have a large following, you're going to be okay taking 75 or 85% of comps because you're going to move 300 cards in that hour at that price, or 200, whatever that is. You're going to move hundreds of cards at once rather than listing them, waiting, back and forth offering, shipping, where's my pack, like all this type of stuff. So I think we just see more and more movement to that with the singles, where the concept on the front end was like a breaking platform for new products.
Right.
I think more and more singles are going to move in that direction. A lot more sourcing will happen there. And what's cool about that is when you don't have a ton of comps on something a little bit more short printed, unique, a little more valuable, you really get to see where the market actually is if you got a room full of people.
Well,
in
and
there.
the other thing with Whatnot is unless you have a system in place, and I would recommend this if you plan to buy higher end stuff on Whatnot. One, be patient, but two, have a system in place because a lot of these deals are 15-second auctions. You better have something set up to be able to check. Yes, check comps. You better have a system. I have one. You better have one if you're going to try it. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself eating it on a regular basis because that stuff goes crazy. There's one room that we like to watch. I have to put it on mute because they just scream. Yeah. But it's Prestige, and they run $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 cards in that room on 5-second sudden death auctions. Yeah. And it's insane to watch. It's just absolutely insane to watch. Go watch an hour and watch $200,000 worth of cards move. It's crazy.
Can't imagine the pressure of sourcing that. How many people you have to have looking nonstop, buying, how many consistent, you buy out a whole collection. Great. I need to do that 5 times a month. Yeah. So it's fun to watch. It's been really interesting. Do you want to roll over? Ready to roll out the big news?
Let's roll out the big news and a little drum roll.
I don't know what we're going to say because I don't know if it's going to be the same time. You go first.
We're opening a shop.
Ta-da!
Yeah. Are you excited with us?
A round of applause. So it's been something that we've kind of talked about as a dream off and on for several years now. And as we've been moving forward and getting deeper into the hobby, continue with the podcast and rolling out all these new things, we think we're gonna take a chance on a dream of ours and open up a shop together. We're actively searching in the Columbus area. We're looking at properties. We got all the business things getting ironed out, all the fun stuff that you got to get in place. But we're actively walking through retail spaces, and so.
It could be 60 days. It could be
a year.
It depends on how. Yeah. One of the things we're finding in this process is that the commercial real estate market does not have consumer protections in place like the residential market does. There's no equal housing opportunity for commercial real estate. So,
and if they haven't heard about sports cards or what that market is like, the only picture they have is going and buying a 25-cent pack, when they were young. So
right.
We do have some spots. We've had several that we've already been very interested in at this point. It could take a little while, but before too long, in that central Ohio area, we are going to have a local card shop, The Ball Card Show, sports cards for sports collectors. And we cannot wait to share it with you. One of the things we're super excited about with getting into YouTube is we are going to document our process. So if it's a massive success and we're able to get things open, let's say 2 to 3 months from now, we're opening, you're going to watch us walk through getting a property, checking it out.
You're going to episodic stuff every week from us. Yep. Hey, this is what we've been doing. This is where we're at. And then once the shop's open, you're going to get the day-to-day.
Yeah.
See what the business really is like, the ups, downs, the highs, the lows.
Yep. It's going to be a very interesting process to film and document, and we're going to share the struggles with it. I think we see a lot of stories of people like, I opened a shop, not realizing that it's not an easy feat, that it is very expensive. It's not a cheap thing to do, that it takes a lot of money to keep a shop open. I think that's what, as we run numbers and all this, it's what does this actually take to be a sustainable business? But what we wanted to do is the heart of this is because we love cards, because we build a community with you, because it's something that we've been doing for a while. I know for me, that's been like my source of income. It's been something growing for you where it's taking over sources of income. So we're going to be formalizing this thing, and the Ball Card Show will be opened up as a brick and mortar sometime in the near future. We can't wait to share it with you.
Absolutely.
We're excited.
Very much so.
And we're scared.
Yep.
But we believe that you just got to, at some point, if you have a dream to do something like this, you got to take a chance on it.
Once we're open, come buy stuff from us.
Yeah, that's an expectation as well. There'll be so much more content about this coming in the future. But as always, now we're going to be saying, if you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe, comment below. We would love to chat with you. So if something we said you disagree with, throw it in there in the comments. If you have an observation, we'd love to interact with you on there. And then be sure to share with a friend that we are live in person. You see our faces. We will be back next week. This has been the Ball Card Show, the sports podcast.
For the sports collector.
Bye now.
Peace.